All right, this one's gonna get a lot of people mad, but we're gonna do it anyway. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here at the stable. The last time we were here, we cracked open the rotating assembly of the Marketplace 302 and found some pretty worn bearings. So therefore, that calls for an engine rebuild. And for those of you that keep up with the channel, you'll know that that's exactly what I did not want to do. But here we are. All of the rod bearings were showing pretty good signs of wear and tear. 90% of the main bearings looked good, besides the thrust bearing that had a lot of signs of wear as well as some scoring, but overall not terrible. But before we get into that, we have some packages to unbox. Keep your gift a surprise, unwrap your present before opening this envelope. Okay, guys, what did you send? This looks kind of cool. I love this gift wrapping. This makes it feel special. Yeah! Nice. A first aid kit. Be safe, keep this kit in your garage or your car, but it's a good idea to have one. 110 characters left, better use them all. I'd hate for all this space to go to waste. Okay, I'm going to get some coffee now from Demon View LLC. Okay, I know who this is from now. Honestly, I wish I would have opened this yesterday because me and a piston ring got into it yesterday, and I promise this is worse than it looks. And I obviously just wrapped it in one of these blue towels and some tape. I am going to put a band-aid on right now because I keep on reopening this cut. Huge thanks to Demon View. Now let's open this next one. Oh, nice. I know what this is. How freaking sick. For those of you who remember, our T5 ended up having a broken counter shaft, which was about $200 to replace. Our good friend Anthony reached out and said he had an extra counter shaft for us to use. So not only did he send us the counter shaft for free, and on top of that, he also sent us an extra input shaft as well as a shifter. The input shaft, I'll get into why we need this in another video. It involves the other T5 though. So Anthony just made the stuff we have to do with the transmission 10 times easier and 10 times cheaper. And not only did he send all of these parts, but he didn't even want to charge us for shipping. So why don't we give a big thumbs up to Anthony because he helped us out a ton. All right, and the next package I've already opened because it has to do with our engine rebuild. For our rebuild, we're going to be using 3 different new parts. One of them being a set of rod bearings. These are a set of Cleveite rod bearings being 10 undersized. Next up, we have our main bearings, which are also 10 undersized. These larger ones being the thrust bearings, which is what went bad on ours. And last but not least, we have a set of piston rings. I've already opened these for the sake of curiosity. Sliced finger. But we have a set of sealed power 40 over piston rings. Top rings are a moly faced ring. Middle ones are just cast iron, I believe. And last but not least, we have our oil retaining rings. This episode would literally not be possible without the help of the Catman and Robert Lugo. As soon as the last engine video went out and we discovered the bad bearings, Robert Lugo and the Catman both reached out and said, how can I help? And lo and behold, now we have new crank and rod bearings as well as new piston rings. I can't thank you guys enough, and I hope to make you guys proud. Let's get this engine rebuilt. All right, was filming for about 20 minutes without any of the mics on. I guess I was laughing by myself when I dropped the lifter into the oil. Let's continue with audio this time. Anyway, the cam does not look terrible. There is no like scoring or anything weird going on. I did have a buddy offer to sponsor a cam. I believe that cam from the listing, if we should even believe anything from the listing anymore, is an E303 cam, which is not the most aggressive cam. What do you guys think though? Should we throw a cam in here and have a nice chop? Oh, we should also inspect the cam bearings. And for those of you who didn't know, the camshaft does have bearings. If you look in between the cylinders, you'll see these guys right here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I remember the last time I built the 289, the machine shop said I needed new cam bearings. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? The cam doesn't have bearings. But they do, so let's inspect them. Kind of hard to show you guys, but overall, they don't look too bad. I would say that most of the wear and tear that you see on cam bearings are from the install and removal of them, because you're trying to remove a 2-foot metal piece with not a lot of leverage, so you end up banging these up pretty good. But once again, I would say these are good to run. Before we can start any of the reassembly, we're gonna clean up this block the best that we can. I'm scraping away from the internals of the block. That way I don't drop any extra stuff in there that I might not catch later. This is coming out better than I thought. That gasket came off easier than I thought it would. Let's see if we can say the same about the head gaskets. Before I start scraping away at the gasket, I'm going to plug the oil holes or the oil valleys so I don't get any crap in there that I probably won't be able to get out later. There's only really 2 of them that we need to worry about. It is this corner up here and this corner up here. These are blind holes. They don't lead anywhere for the bolts, and these are all coolant passages, so we'll clean those out later in a different way. And then these bolt holes on the bottom also go to the coolant passages, so we're not going to worry about those right now. But you can see this textured gasket material right here. That's the residue of whatever the head gasket left, so we're going to try to clean it the best that we can without scoring the surface of the block here. I'm going to switch to a fresh razor blade, which already seems to be working much easier. All right, with the deck of the block mostly cleaned, we're just gonna give it a quick. All right, this one's gonna get a lot of people mad, but we're gonna do it anyway. We're going to hit the deck of the block with some 400 grit sandpaper. No, this is not resurfacing the deck like a machine would, but we don't have a machine. So the 400 grit is light enough where it'll just clean the surface, but it's not going to take away much material. I'm also not using any pressure. I'm just letting the straightness of the block take care of it. So like I said, we did almost nothing to the block. We just cleaned up the minor imperfections that there were and a little bit of the gasket that was left. So you can see right here, we did not make this surface completely shiny or sand away a whole top layer of this deck. You can still see the outline of the previous gasket, but now we just have a clean surface, and that's exactly what we were looking for. Now we can do the other side. Guys, once again, this is not resurfacing the deck. This is just to clean the surface. If I wanted to resurface the deck, I mean, you could either take it to the machine shop, or you could hit it with like some 120 grit to 220 all the way to like 400, which I've seen a bunch of people do, and I have done myself on a motorcycle engine before, and it worked perfectly fine. Anyway, doing this also gives us a good idea of the condition of the deck. As you can see, there's a straight line here, and another straight line here, and another straight line here, which are high spots. It could or could not be within tolerances. We'll find that out later, but right now we're just cleaning it. I'm actually gonna crack open the door now because all of this parts cleaner is starting to make my mouth taste like coins. Another really important step before we reassemble this block is we have to clean up all of the head bolt threads, and to do that, I'm going to use a thread chaser or a thread restorer set, which is a bit different from a tap and die set. These ones are much less aggressive than these, so since we're just cleaning and not redoing threads, this is our best option. I'm going to fill these up with the parts cleaner so they can soak. And these threads weren't that bad, they were more just oily than anything. But the reason why it's so important to have these thread holes clean is if they are dirty, filled with oil or gunk, it's going to be hard to get an accurate torque reading when we do our torque sequence on the heads. Therefore, the head might not be torqued down right, cause further problems, yada yada yada. Then we hit them with the shot of air. Right here you can see the gunk that it pulls out of the threads. These bottom head bolt threads go into the coolant passages, so there is no way I can fill them up like we did up here. So we're just going to spray them, chase them, and then spray them once again. And I am putting a bit of resistance side to side and kind of just being a little bit aggressive with this. I'm twisting it a couple times and then moving a thread down, twisting it back and forth, and then moving a thread down. This one's the first one that's given me any type of resistance, so this one can't exactly be done by hand. So let's give it a little bit of encouragement. So now that it goes in and out with no resistance by hand, I know that it's clean enough. I've already gone ahead and cleaned up the other side of the head bolt threads, as well as cleaned up the coolant passages. And the way that I cleaned up the coolant passages, I basically just flipped the engine over and blew some compressed air into the coolant passages, where there was a whole lot of these chunky little rust pieces that kind of just break apart. So we are almost done with cleaning this block, but we still have to take care of this nasty lifter valley right here. It has a bunch of crud all up inside it, and to prevent all that stuff from flowing back into the engine, I'm going to turn it over almost at a 45 degree. I also have the oil pan sitting under it, so now we're just gonna blast it. At this point, I'm also going to start shooting all the oil passages I see with some parts cleaner to get everything cleared out. Alrighty, the valley is now clean and dry, rid of all the goo and the shmoo. There's one more thing we need to do before we start reassembly. In order for our new piston rings to seal properly, we have to hone each one of the cylinders, which I'm sure most of you know what that is, but for those of you who don't, this is a cylinder honing tool, which is basically 3 stones that have a certain grit to them that will go into the cylinders and basically deglaze the cylinder walls to get a new crosshatch going. But before we can even start that, let's clean up these cylinders, because we've done a whole lot of degreasing and air compression, so there's probably some shmoo in here. I've honestly never noticed that brake cleaner smells like avgas. 100 low lead. So I know it's hard to see here, but inside the piston you can see this wall is very, very shiny, but towards the bottom of the cylinder you can see this area about an inch in length where it's just dull, and that is because the piston does not go all the way down there, so the piston never made contact with any of that area that's dull, and that dull area is from the previous hone. I've kept the door open because it's a pretty nice day. I know a lot of you in Canada are very jealous right now, but anyway, I have 1030 oil here, and I'm just going to drill a small hole in the cap. This is why I put the hole. Glaze the cylinder walls with the oil. I'm also going to oil the stones. Oh, those things absorb the oil really quick. All right, we've got it attached to our drill. All right. Let's add a little bit more oil. Okay, so taking a look at the cylinder walls, we can see the cross, or the new cross hatching going on. I probably could have used a bit more angle, so more speed in and out to get a more aggressive angle rather than these that are kind of linear. So we're gonna go ahead and clean it up, look at it, and then do it again. We're gonna hit it one more time with a little bit increase in the in and out speed so we could get a more aggressive angle. Obviously not going to get it right the first time, but starting with this cylinder, we could get a good idea on how to do the rest of them. Okay, so right here you can see the differences between this cylinder and a cylinder that hasn't been done yet. It is still shiny. I haven't seen any low spots on the cylinder yet, but that brings me to my next point. Thank you to everybody who has helped out and gave us their inputs on how we can do the best job we can here. With that being said, yes, I know that taking it to a machine shop and having them rebore the engine or check for roundness and check for clearances would yield the best results, but that is just not within our budget here. If we had a bore gauge and micrometers, of course we would do it. We're gonna do our best with what we have to get this engine back together. So let's see what result we get. Once again, I do appreciate everybody's input. I know you guys just want to see me build this engine to the best potential that we can, but like the Catman said, unless you guys are sending parts or pitching in for the machine work, It's going to be what it's going to be. Once again, this honing process is not to bore out the engine, so we don't want to remove any material really. We just want to deglaze the engine so we can get rid of that shininess, is probably the simplest way to put it. It's just to make sure the rings feel at home. Add a little bit more wheelie. All right, I do like this crosshatch a little bit better than the first one. As you can see, we have more of an angle rather than it being in parallel with the engine deck, so it points more up and down. I like it. With each time we do this, we're basically going to perfect the speed of the drill as well as the in and out speed. So by the time we hit the other cylinders, we should have a pretty good idea on what we need to do. And one thing that a lot of people don't know or just might miss is that these stones have different grits, and every ring has a different honing grit that they need. So cast iron rings need like 220-ish, moly rings need a little bit higher grit, maybe like 280-ish, and so on and so forth. So if you're doing this, make sure you have the right grit for the rings that you're using. All right, so I have this entire bank done with the honing. Cylinder number 4 did have a dark spot towards the top of the cylinder right here. That means that the stone was not making contact with this area right here. But we got a pretty good hatch on everywhere else in the cylinder. I could keep going with the hone until I get this dark spot right here, but then by that time I would already have worn off a ton of material everywhere else in the cylinder. I can live with that. We're not going to take off too much material and overbore this engine. Save your comment. Yes, a machine shop would be able to bore that perfectly. Keep in mind that this block is already bored 40 over, so it's already on its last legs. I don't want to take it to 60. We take it to 60 and these cylinder walls are going to start getting too thin, causing overheating issues and so on. Ideally, I would like an engine to be max at 30 overbore. 40 overbore is already not what I expected. The engine was listed at 30 overbore, but whatever. I do have an oil pan under here collecting all the residue and runoff that's falling off of the block. You can see the new crosshatch pattern that we got going on here. I'm going to hit it one more time just to see if we could get rid of this dark spot right here. But like the other cylinder, if we can't get it out within 2 passes, we're just going to leave it and move on. All right, now you can see all the cylinders have this dull finish to them, and my hand has also lost all of its feeling. It would probably be easier if I had a constant speed drill, but this one is variable, so it just depends on how much I press the trigger. So trying to keep it pressed in the same location for all 8 cylinders was pretty tiring. But anyway, the block is pretty much ready to accept all the new parts. All right, in order to stay organized, I'm going to lay out all the rings before we measure the gaps. So we have all of our rings laid out here. Our top ring, second ring, and our oil rings. This one is a 3-piece one with a coil in the middle and these 2 pieces on either side of that coil. So at this point, I want to check the end gap of the piston rings, which is this gap right here once this ring is in the cylinder. I did specifically order these for a 40 overbore cylinder size, but we're gonna recheck them just to be sure. But of course, these rings didn't come with a gap chart, so we're gonna have to figure it out on our own. Using a simple equation, it would be our bore size times 0.0045 would give us our piston ring end gap. So we know our bore size is 40 over, and from the factory these came with a 4-inch cylinder bore, so we have 4.04 times 0.0045 equals 0.018. So that's our recommended gap. And if you're wondering how we know our bore size without a bore gauge, we grab one of the pistons, and the piston itself will tell us right here it is 0.04 oversized. And that equation is just for the top ring. Some people will argue that the top ring and the second ring should have the same end gap, but we're going to follow the gap chart that we found online, which shows we should have a difference from the top ring and second ring. Not by much, it's just 0.5 compared to 0.45. So our end gap is 4.04 times 0.005 equals 0.0202. So now we have our end gaps for the top ring as well as the bottom ring. All right, so now at our cylinder, we have our top ring right here, and now we can start checking the actual end gap, trying not to score the surfaces. And since we don't have a ring squaring tool, we're going to use an old piston to push it square. All right, so the piston ring is now in and it's squared with the surface, and you can see how small our end gap really is right here. And to measure it, we're going to be using some feeler gauges. And once again, this top ring should be around 18. So that one fits pretty easy. I'm gonna move on to 19 thousandths and see how that feels. So 19 thousandths looks like it's struggling to go in. So this ring looks like it fits comfortably at 18, but say the gap was 20, we can't really add more material on here, so that's pretty much what we get. But say the ring gap was 16 instead, we could get a ring filer and open that gap just a tad to get it up to 18, but I'm comfortable with this top ring fitment, so let's go ahead and try the second ring. Second ring should be slightly bigger on the gap. Let's see what we get here. Clears 18. Clears 19, 20 starting to get pretty snug. Let's see if it'll accept 22. Nope, does not accept 22. So ring gap on the second ring measures right at 20. And if you remember our calculation, 20 is right where we want it to be. So I'm going to recheck all of these while noting what the end gaps are on all of them. All right, all of our rings have now been sized and double checked. All of them were within tolerances besides one of them, which was the number 6 cylinder. The top ring was reading at 19, while the second ring was reading at 18. And if you remember our equation, our second ring is supposed to be slightly bigger than our top ring, but on cylinder number 6, it was the other way around. Our top ring was slightly bigger than our second ring. Top ring reading at 19, while the second ring was reading at 18. So I went ahead and filed it down a bit and got it to 20. So that was the only thing that was of concern that needed a change. Cylinder 1 was basically perfect, reading at 18 for the top ring and 20 for the second ring. If we look at cylinder number 2, however, the top one was good at 18, but the second one was at 19. I could file it down to get it up to 20, but it could also be a variation within the cylinder walls, so I'm not going to mess with it. I'm pretty comfortable with that. If we take a look at cylinder 4, 5, 6, and 7, the top ring was reading at 19, and that we can't do anything about because we can't make that gap any smaller, but it's 1/1000th difference, not a very big deal. I haven't measured any of these oil rings. These don't see that much heat, so the tolerances are a bit looser. With that taken care of, I'm going to put a light layer of oil on all of the cylinder walls to prevent any surface rust. And now we can bag this engine because we are now out of time for this episode, but we have the engine fully prepped and ready for reassembly. I know we're gonna get a couple comments saying that this is not the best way that it could be done, but with the tools and the budget we have, I feel we did a pretty damn good job. Anyway, we will continue the reassembly in the next video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next one.